The Speaking of Cults podcast is presented solely for general, informational, educational, and entertainment purposes. The use of information on this podcast or materials linked from it is at the user's own risk. The views, information, or opinions expressed by the host and guests are solely those of the individuals involved and do not constitute medical or other professional advice. Hello and welcome to the Speaking of Cults podcast. This is Chris Shelton, your host. Thank you very much for joining me again this week. We are talking this week about, one of my favorite things to talk about, woo, woo-woo, things that people maybe believe are true that maybe not. Maybe we can challenge these things. Maybe there are ideas that people have that maybe aren't not only not necessarily true, because there's lots and lots of that in the world, but maybe destructively so. Maybe like it's harming them, even though they might not necessarily realize that it is, or it certainly isn't helping to the degree that maybe they believe that it is. So to help break this down this week, Helen Greene is my guest, and she is someone who is associated with the Recovering from Religion Foundation. She also has her own story and background and experience that we're going to talk about today. Helen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for having me. I'm excited. I always love talking about woo shit because I was so ingrained in it for so long. So I love talking about it.
Well, I guess I could say the same. I feel very
right. We're kindred spirits.
very, very much, very much. Let me ask you just to get started right away, because this is something I've been thinking about recently. Does it seem to you, from your experience in speaking with people who are, or working with people who recover from, maybe more extreme or more not so great for them experiences with religious or spiritual abuse, it feels to me like also, and from my experience in the ex-cult world and my own experience, feels to me like we're not smarter than anybody else, but we had an experience a lot of other people haven't had. And it tends to open the eyes a little bit. Maybe there's some trust issues there also. I don't know. What do you think about that?
I found those of us, I grew up liberal Catholic. I grew up Catholic, but it wasn't very, it wasn't a very strong culture. Like if you were in Scientology or Jehovah's Witness, or you were from an evangelical background, we were Catholics. We went to church every day. And eventually, I just transitioned away from the Catholic Church, and I studied paganism. And then eventually moved into becoming an atheist, a skeptic, whatever. But what happened along the way was it was just little cuts along the way. I call it the death of 1,000 cuts. Cause it wasn't oh my God, I woke up one day and oh, this is all bullshit. It was a gradual process. So for me, I didn't go through a lot of the anxiety and and paradigm shifts and things like that other people did, that I talked to and know that were very much traumatized by religion, and and their brain is now trying to figure out what is real, what is not real, and they also have a resistance to trusting people because of the indoctrination, and because their emotions and their thoughts were used against them. So it's very hard to find the ability to trust. Because you can be a humanist, skeptic, but you can also be an abusive person, so that it doesn't free you from being an asshole, it doesn't. I hate to tell you, but so I understand why a lot of people, when they leave, especially high control groups, transitioning into healthy models of behavior and support can be very difficult for people. And especially if or they don't know how to have that skepticism about how they'll point to religious leaders being terrible people, but their boyfriend isn't. and he might be an abusive butthead, but it's a different, because the brain, it just goes to the pattern that it knows. If there's a charismatic person that isn't like a authoritative figure, you're going to swing back over to it because that makes you feel comfortable, and that's what your pattern knows, and that's why even though you think religion is bullshit, the rest can be kind of difficult to kind of untangle.
I'll say for sure. What has just for the audience to say, because I know not everybody who's listening to this is familiar with what, I've mentioned it a couple of times, the Recovering from Religion Foundation and that activity. What, just so we'll know, you're not here necessarily as in an official capacity from that group, but what is that group? Who are they?
So for those people that don't know what Recovering from Religion is, we are a 501c3 organization. And our mission statement is to offer hope, healing, and support for those that are dealing with doubt and non-belief. So you can be anywhere on the spectrum. You could be you're sitting in a pew and you're still a believer, but like something's not jiving. Like, why do we hate trans people now? Like, but you're still believing in God. Or you've left the church, you've been out for 20 years and still have a fear of hell. Like you can be wanting to change religions. But basically we have a hotline. It's 194 I doubt it. And also on our website, we go to recoveringfromreligion.org. There's international numbers, and there's also a live chat on the website. And on the other end is an agent, and the agent's going to walk you through whatever question, concern that you have. I like to call it like street epistemology with emotional support, and we also offer community. So that's a lot of what we do. We also have a resource page, which I always now saying that we offer everything from abortion to Xenu. So like if there's anything on like that has to do with religion, critical thinking, religious history, whatever psychological studies and things that people need to kind of deconstruct and deconvert. We have a huge toolbox of our resources. And David Tisha, one of our volunteers, he's a professional mental health counselor. He does all the resourcing. So we as volunteers will find resources. Like there's a really good video that I watched the other day that I sent to him. He'll watch it, see if it's a good resource, and add it to it. So and it's a lot of stuff. There's vlogs and blogs and videos and books and articles. Like it's a whole thing. So and that's free. So you don't have to like call the hotline to get access to it. It's right on our website. We also offer online support groups. We have an online community because it's really important for people to find community after they leave religion. And our online community is tailored. So like we have a Scientology channel. So if you're a former Scientologist, you can talk to other former Scientologists that are deconstructing and working through those issues, because like I don't speak Scientology, I speak paganism and Catholic. So, right. But I'm kind of beyond that now. I don't really need that community. But it's there for people that do need it, and it's heavily moderated. So this way, people aren't acting like buttheads. And it's a good place. And then there's like 2 online hangouts for people to meet every week that it can sometimes turn into a support group, or they're just talking about like random BS and just bonding and having friendships. So, and then we do every year we do an excursion where clients and volunteers get together, and we have workshops and we get to meet everybody in person. It's really, really great. We just, our last one was in Charlottesville, Virginia, and it's going to be the 3rd weekend of September 2025, if the world doesn't burn down. so that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I predict it will happen. Okay. Okay, good.
Yeah. You're second now.
And how long have you been connected with this group?
It's been 4 years. I started in November of 2020. Awesome. So right now I'm ambassadoring. So I do this. I invade other people's podcasts and talk about what I do. Can I be your podcast? I can talk a lot. And then I've hosted our our podcast, which you've been on. I am going to be on again. I also I'm the head of our fundraising team lead, so I do that as well. So I try to be an agent and talk to people. I did it for like a hot minute, and I was like, this isn't for me. So, but the wonderful thing about recovering from religion, like you have to do the agent training as a volunteer. And that gives you a really good tool set on how to talk to people, which is great. But if you want to do stuff behind the scenes, like we have like a social media team that does all of our like shorts and stuff and edits and does all the things for our videos and our promotions. We have someone that does web development. We have someone that is a treasurer. Like if there's a talent that you think you can add, we are always looking for volunteers. There's an application on the website. It's only 4 hours a month. That's all you need to devote. I put in way more than that, but and also it's a very supportive community. I've made some really wonderful friendships there since being involved with the organization. So that's been awesome. So it's just been a good time. And it's one of the things that I'm probably the most passionate about in my life is getting people the help and support that they need through RFR.
Awesome. Well, that's great. And you're definitely enthusiastic about it. And quite honestly, so am I. That's one of the things I like talking about because it is a great place to land or get some support or help, in recovering from religion or in having questions or wonderings about it. And you want to talk to somebody who's outside of that world and can, give you an outside perspective. So I think that's a valuable service. What have you found in your 4 years of experience in working with and hearing the war stories and all that about this? Well, first off, what's the number one? What would you say is the majority reason that people contact?
Fear of hell.
Fear of hell.
It's the number one. It's the number one thing. It's the number one thing on our resource page. Is the thing that people call about the most, and it is always people that are going. They're either deconstructing or they've left, but it's still there because thinking about fear. It's false emotions appearing real. So in this sort of context, that these emotions, it feels real, even though it's not. And those emotions are still there. And especially if you've been indoctrinated, you're told since like you were a small child that if you doubt, if you stray from the path, that the devil's going to get you, and God's going to be angry at you. And like, that's traumatizing, like to tell small children that they're gross and dirty and there's something inherently wrong with them. And then you grow up thinking that there is something wrong with you and that you have to always atone. And even when you left religion, that neural pathway is still there. And it's within the emotional center of the brain. That's a trauma. And religious trauma is being studied, which is great to help for professionals to kind of help people with it. But it's one of the things that they have the hardest thing that they know it's probably not real, but the emotional, the logic is not overriding the emotional reactions.
Well, and that is the very heart and soul of trauma. I wonder, do you know, or do you have, because I don't know what kind of intake or information people offer up when they're speaking with you guys or doing, all the work. I'm sure everything eventually is, comes out in one form or another. But I have to wonder about how much of this is a lot of the indoctrination that happens in spiritually abusive homes is physical abuse.
Right.
Laid on top of the words. And it's bad enough when you have issues, in a family where, the parents are also the oppressors. That can be a rough go in any situation. But when religion is added on top of that as the reason this is happening, or this is why this has to occur or something, it can make the whole subject just corrupted for the rest of the person's life. Is that kind of what you guys run into with this?
It depends on the client. And also it depends on like how long that they've been using our services. Like and plus I'm not an agent, so I don't know what the agents are discussing a lot with the clients, but from doing like the hangouts, like after like the RFRX talks, people do talk about, especially since when you're there year after week, they start to trust you. They know your face. They know that you're there to be receptive to them. I have heard so many stories about like SA. I've heard so many stories about physical abuse. I've heard so many stories of people that are emotionally abused and neglected by their families. And it's one of those things that, and I always find this kind of fascinating in like this context of people that are religious and abusive people. I feel like, I don't know if this is everybody, but feel like they kind of have an out. Like if I pray and ask God to forgive me for like beating my kid, it's an out. And they don't have a way to, and that's a coping mechanism, a toxic one, that they don't have the ability to understand why they abuse and the effect that they're having on their child. Because if they think that somehow spare the rod, spoil the child, is real, it's something you have to do because God is commanding it. That's one, fucked up. And two, it's a moral injury, because what if you're a parent that doesn't want to do that, and you marry someone that comes from like comes from an abusive family? This is what they did, and let's say it's a dominant male, and you're supposed to follow what your husband does, and that cycle of abuse just keeps happening over and over again, because God ordained it.
It's definitely a clash of the old and the new, and culture and education, and certainly awareness of the fact that trauma or abuse are even a thing. Because for a long, long, long time in our history, and I'm not saying this to excuse anything. I'm saying this to sort of try to sort of explain or lay out, like, for at least as I understand it, like how this happens. Because you think, well, these people are just evil. And it's like, well, no, it's more of their whole concept of how people work has nothing to do with how you and I think people work, right? Like trauma and that kind of stuff has nothing to do with it. Like the whole idea of breaking a child the same way you break a donkey or a horse or something is pretty classical thinking in a lot of generational lines. This is old school thinking, that this is how children are dealt with. It's only very recently that we've started changing our tune on that. And I think that comes from,
Yeah. And I think, it's culture. Like my parents didn't physically abuse me, but I definitely, I'm a Gen Xer. Like I remember my friends telling me about their dads, like their parents spanking them. My husband's one of them, which I'm like, that's weird. And now, we know even like the damage of any sort of physical abuse on a child is going to damage them to a certain degree, and even if it's just once in a while, you're losing the respect of your parent, and you're learning to fear the person that's supposed to love and take care of you, and that's bad for the brain and bad for us as human beings. And I think that, and for people that are in sort of high religious, control groups, that information about child abuse is not going to get to them, because they're not going to, one, they've learned that their pastor has all the answers, so they're not going to seek out mental health resources. They're not going to ask themselves questions like, am I causing harm? They follow the recipe that they were given, and straying from the path, God's going to get you, God's going to punish you. The devil, you're going against God's word, and on it goes. That's why that cycle of fear and abuse keeps going and going and going, because you do the patterns, you do the recipe. I was told that if I don't do this, God is not going to be happy, and my kid is going to go to hell someday if I don't do these things.
Exactly. Yeah. What part do you think, or what do you think about what part the social network a person is involved in plays in this as they get older or grow up, because I wonder about that too. Because obviously not all children who are abused become monsters or become abusers themselves. Yeah. Like there's a lot of latitude in here, right? I mean, free will or however you want to express it, or context.
Or they have supportive people around them eventually, and they learn that, or they have a good empathy center, and somebody modeled what it's like to be, how you're supposed to treat other people. Something happens along the way, that they, and I think that's the majority of people. I really do. I think that the majority of people want to be good people. And when they develop good empathy, they will learn, they'll be like, oh, I don't want to do to anyone what was done to me.
Sure. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And yet at the same time, some of this childhood conditioning can be so strong that it can draw a person into groups that, objectively speaking, aren't good groups to be part of, like, Scientology, right? Or other kind of culty groups, because the control, the hierarchical structure, the promises and the euphoria that these groups induce can be quite inviting. And it can feel like, oh, I'm home, until,
then slowly over time, it's like, I can't go against the leader. I can't say no.
Yeah, exactly. Well, okay. So now, but your journey through this was actually a little bit different, because you mentioned you came from more of a more liberal Catholic family, and then you sort of rolled over into paganism. And I had to laugh because in one of your interviews, you also mentioned a brief flirtation with the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis. And the only reason that I laugh about that so hard is because that's what L. Ron Hubbard was involved in.
So funny.
I've done whole shows about that group, and they're quite something, But
the OTO, they're special, because I was a very eclectic pagan, it's kind of being like a cavalier Christian. Eclectic paganism is like we learned and this is the one of the many things I'm grateful about being pagan. You learn so much mythology, you learn so much about different religions, you learn so much about ancient practices. To a certain degree, there's a lot of history that you're learning, because the way people worshipped before the Christian religion, the Judeo-Christian religions, before that, and also kind of alongside it, because that just keeps happening. It was more like animism, and then it developed into having deities, but it was still very nature based, and it was more multifaceted. And it's very interesting to learn how cultures, their gods reflect the culture that they live in, the place that they live in. And it's the psychological relationship with your environment that is very fascinating about religion. And I got to learn that when I was a pagan. That's why I didn't really believe in deities. I believed in a universal consciousness, that we're connected to blah, blah, blah. And it holds reality together. And it's just all new age mumbo jumbo. But so when I was I was a high priestess in the pagan religion for 10 years. And one of my friends that had joined our group, she was involved with the OTO, which was weird because they don't allow a lot of women. They only have because it's so there was an overlap with Freemasonry, and that's very patriarchal. And then the particular OTO group that she was involved in, there's a lot of people that were in the Freemasonry group, so it kind of overlapped. There was a few women, and they have private rituals and public rituals. And we went to a public ritual, and it was weird. It is highly organized. There are rules you have to follow. You cannot stray from the rules. It's kind of how to sit, how to stand, how to hold your hands, how to but also at the same time, as I said to you, it was like watching people have sex, but they weren't having sex, because there's a lot of sexual sexual almost performance without like clothes coming off and people actually having sex. It is very much about like bringing down the divine male and female energies, and then and these people have like static experiences that sound like they're having an orgasm. And it's just weird because you're just sitting there, just taking it all in. Like, this is normal.
Wow. And that was the public ritual that you went to. So privately, they're probably doing a lot more than that.
I heard, they have sex, like ritual sex with other, it's I don't dumb anybody's yum. Like, if that's what you want to do, I'm fine, as long as everybody's consensual adults. I'm not judging, because that would be wrong with me.
Yeah, it gets a little weird around that activity, though, in terms of consent and consenting adults, and
I'm
under influence of coercive control. So it's a wild ride when you go down that road.
Yeah, it's you're hoping everybody's on the up and up,
Yeah.
And this is something I didn't really think about at the time, but now, like, I've seen so much, like, even within the pagan community, of power dynamics and people being lured into charismatic leaders. Like, you can have a cult of one. You see it. It's in every single structure out there, that people can use their power and influence to control and abuse other people. And they promise it's the carrot and the stick.
Yeah.
Like, I'm promising you some kind of power, some kind of reaching, a new level of consciousness. You're going to be like, that's whichever, whatever. And it's always the same thing. And it's always the same thing. I'm the gatekeeper. Okay.
Yeah.
And you got to find the key. And then I will bestow upon you, when you have reached this level, some, great understanding, and either it can be through money, coercion, sex, favors, whatever it is, like, pick your poison.
And this was your experience in the pagan world.
It wasn't, I saw it, and I knew people on the peripheral that, that were doing this. This was not part of our group. We were very, we were our attitude was, everybody's a student, everybody's a teacher. Like, me and my best friend were facilitators, that we would encourage people. Like, they'd be like, I want to learn about, runes. Okay, good. I'm like, we'll help you, but you're going to study and you're going to teach a class on it. Because we would give them the tools, that's how you learn. We kind of took on the attitude that the best student is to learn to study the thing that they're interested in and have a guide. Sure. And we did have like some, a little bit of hierarchical structure. Like, we had rules and things that you had to follow, so everybody felt safe. Like, in the pagan religion, you can do ceremony skyclad, which is doing them naked, like on the Sabbaths. We didn't do that, because it's weird. Like, it's just not my job. I'm like, unless I'm sleeping with you, you don't get to see me naked. Like, you have to be a very special person. Like, so, but also we knew groups that did do ritual sky cloud, but they just did ritual naked. There was no sex involved. Nobody was like, it was all consensual and agreed upon. And then you get these other little outside shit that you would see. You would see the power dynamics. I had one of my friends, her sister was in another group, and another member of that group left, and her sister was really good friends with that particular person, and the leader said they could not talk to each other anymore if her sister wanted to stay in the group. And I'm like, okay, you can't do that. That's not okay. It's like, people have the right to leave, come and go as they please. That's, and it's like, but that's the thing. That's when you see little things like that, that's just, and then your brain's going, well, what else is she doing? That leader, know?
Exactly. It's funny because I've said a few times over the years that the problems of the drama and the factioning and the power trips and things that happen in the ex-Scientology world are something that happen in all the other ex-cult communities. And it took me a lot of years before I felt like I was in a place where I could say that with some degree of, of truth. Having observed it in the former Jehovah's Witnesses and the former Mormons and the former, so many former Christian groups, certainly ex-cult groups. And first of all, though, in the pagan world. Because after I got out of Scientology and I was talking about that stuff, I was invited actually to speak at a pagan convention about this very thing. And all about the different groups and various things. But one thing I didn't learn that I wanted to ask you about, because you did spend 10 years as a high priestess in this, and it's something I've always been curious about, is what's the deal? Like, what is the point of being a pagan? And what are these rituals actually supposed to accomplish or be about? Is it just community forming, or is it there's a purpose?
Because you can follow the religion and not be part of a coven.
Okay.
It can be you can be a solitary witch where you're doing the practice and you're not part of a group.
Oh, okay. You don't have to.
If you ever want to watch it, it's a little long, but I have a whole video on the RFRX series about paganism, the problems and the positives, problems, and perils of a ancient new religion. And
sure. Well, just break it down for me.
So I'll break it down. So I'm going to give you the Cliff Notes version. Okay. Yeah. Like if you want more detail, go watch that video. But I recommend you do it on the background when you're cleaning the house because it's long. but basically, there's many reasons why people get involved with paganism, especially if they were like me and a product of the 90s, a feminist, and someone that when they were younger, they're looking for some form of control. So for people that leave, even like any sort of religious structure, you can leave the structure, but you don't leave the magical thinking behind. That's the work. It is, why do we do the things that we do? And the thing is, though, is that paganism is related to nature. We can prove nature exists. We can and there is no separation. We're nature. We are nature. We're part of the natural world. So there's that spiritual, but it's I call it like a psychological relationship but it feels spiritual because we know how powerful nature is, and people they for example, amorphize animals, and they will attribute certain things to certain animals, and you will take that on as some part of your spiritual journey. So with the rituals and doing spell work, so the rituals, there's 8 pagan holidays a year, and we have Sabbats. They're called the Sabbats. So for example, Yule is going to be on Sunday because it is the winter equinox. We are going to have the shortest day of the year. And then after that, the days get perpetually longer. Our ancestors lived and died by the sun. If you are a agricultural society and you look at those societies, they were sun worshipers. A lot of paganism is around the sun. Okay. That's how the wheel of the year works in modern paganism, which Gerald Gardner stole from other ancient religions. It's the whole thing. So that's a different conversation we can have. But so the rituals, so those are designed to celebrate the wheel of the year, the passing of a season. There's usually there's certain practices and rituals that you do, but you can do those as an atheopagan. You don't have to believe. I'm an atheopagan. I don't believe, but I just love the aesthetics, and that it's sort of like meditation on being connected to our past and stuff, but I don't think it's doing anything. It's just a ritual. Where other people think they are communicating with their god and goddess. They are connecting to the divine. And some people do it in groups. Some people do it alone. Some people only do it with family members. it's just like any other like kind of loose religion, where there's no hierarchy. Also, like there's no dogma, there's no book, there's no like great text, that was like the Quran or something that we're supposed to be drawing from. So it's basically you can kind of do what you want.
Wow,
which is
so
nice.
Really a roll your own sort of practice.
Yeah, it's your choose your own adventure religion.
Right. There we go. All right. Well, hey, fair enough. Like I said, I've always just been kind of curious about it, and I went, to one group's convention, or there was a representative of various things there that I saw, but that was many years ago, and I've always been curious for other people's experiences of this. So thanks for sharing yours. What was it that you said you went from Catholicism to paganism to sort of skepticism?
Yeah, skepticism first, and then I eventually became an atheist.
Oh, excuse me. Okay. Okay, cool. So if hell, or the fear, getting back to people rolling out of this subject, you did not necessarily come out of trauma-based horribleness that led you through your path of this. You just kind of got older and learned more and then got wiser. Thing.
Yeah.
If the fear of hell is the thing that people contact y'all for the most in terms of help, right? You found on the other side of that coin, what have you found to be the thing that has been most, or the things that have been most helpful or useful to people who are reaching for help coming out of a religious or thinking about, their religious experiences?
I think the best thing you can do, if you were talking to a friend and that person says, I know it's not real, but I'm still afraid I'm going to go there. If you say that's stupid, you shouldn't, it's not come on, John, that's bullshit. There is no hell, there's no proof of it. That doesn't alleviate the fear, right. It doesn't, because they know that they know it. It is the emotions that we're trying to get to. And I think that whenever somebody is saying that, they've been victims of purity culture, and there's a lot of sexual shame, and you're wondering why your partner doesn't want to do certain things, and you're kind of you have maybe more positive associations with sex, or your partner may not, and you're trying to get them to do things, and if it sounds very manipulative, if you love me, you'll do this for me or whatever, you're not helping, because the person knows the things that they were told are toxic and bad. But it does, because the brain it still has that trauma, it's going to have those reactions. And if you don't offer a space for them to feel safe and to express their emotions about what they're feeling, and if you discount those things, that person is not going to want to see you as a safe person. They're not going to feel heard, and they're going to kind of pull back from you. So if we're talking about the fear of hell or purity culture or any sort of bullshit, religion, puts upon people that make them feel less than a human being. I think that we are not giving enough space to those people, and even the people that are so religious and also have those fears. Because as soon as you say that's stupid, if I heard that, you're not going to help, they're going to deal their heels in. They're going to, they'll become defensive, because, even if they haven't untangled everything, we know that when they're, in religions, that it's also their identity. So if someone is still having a fear of hell, even though they've left, okay, the brain is but this is associated to who I am on a certain level. They haven't gotten there yet. So basically, when you say that's bullshit, you shouldn't be afraid of hell, it doesn't exist, the brain is just now I hear a threat. Now you're threatening, not only you're discounting what I'm saying to you, but this is a part of my experience for so long, and now you're discounting that, which means you're discounting me. And that, that's what the brain is reacting to.
Absolutely. Yeah. You're talking about personality theory, and it's all about that.
Yeah.
Deeply held beliefs are smack up against the ego, so at least
Yeah.
that's the analogy I draw.
Yeah, even lack of belief. like part of my identity as an atheist is very much tied to who I am as a person.
That's right.
I can't separate the two. The two pieces out of the tube.
Well, it's an interesting challenge too. I'm not going to say or agree that you can't separate the two, but I will say, just because I think it's an important point that that I think some people think they can't, and I would challenge that, because I think anything is challengeable, but only if you're able to bring down that dial, right? Bring down that those levels, right? So that you can actually engage the parts of the brain that sort of manage or allow for change to happen.
Right.
And when you're antagonizing somebody, it's never
going to go well.
Yeah, not how to do that. But I was asking about other things that might be helpful to the person, clearly telling them they're full of shit or they're wrong or they're bad. Thank you for saying that, because it's absolutely important. And one of the biggest things we run into is people's need to react from their own ego rather than just be there for somebody to support them when they're having, when they're in need of that. Mm-hmm. But what else is there, maybe? Is there anything really helpful that is brought into the picture?
I think that if we're looking at people that are still going through the deconstruction process, I think that other things that can be helpful is try to figure out where they're at. So, like if you're talking about someone with their fear, I'll go like, why are you afraid? Okay. And if, and they said, well, I was part of this religion and this was the part of their doctrine. And then you can ask them, have you looked up where that doctrine has come from? Have you looked into, what your actual sect of that religion got those ideas of hell? Who originally came up with like in the Protestant Revolution, like who came up with those certain concepts, who that person was, why they thought that way and why it became so popular within that sect. Because that can kind of help them kind of look at it and go, oh, this was just made up by a person, which can help them start that process, of looking that even though logically they know it's not real, I think that confirmation that this was just made up by some dude and he, or it's usually a dude, and then they kind of, manipulated people into that structure, and made it so that like this particular form of hell and these particular sins and are specific to that group, and then do a comparative, like, look at the Catholic religion. If they're like, Protestant, let's look at the Catholic. What do the Catholics think about hell? And have them have the cognitive dissonance. Like, well, I was taught hell is this, but these people over here are telling me hell's this. Like, how do those twines meet if they're contradicting each other? Because that person, like, let's say they're a Protestant, even though they might have left, they might be still in Protestant circles. Like their wife might still be Protestant, or, family members, or, their coworkers or whatever. So the messaging is still there, even subtle or reminders. So they also might be afraid to look up the information because even though they're not real, like what if God knows I'm looking this up? Like, cause it's a fear response. It's not logical. So I think like giving them certain tools that it's okay to look up information and be like, if you want, I'm like, I'll sit with you, I'll help you. If you want me to look it up, I will, and I can give you the information, if that would help them, and it might be a softer land if it's coming from a friend. So I think that's another tool you can use. But like, you can't go right in with facts because that's not going to go well either. You kind of have to build to facts. Build there.
Well, I think encouraging people to find out more is 100% spot on. I've I think that has been the core of my own work in recovery for the last decade, and very much good return on investment doing that, right? Going out and learning a lot more. Because learning gives you fresher, different, and broader perspectives. And the thing about being stuck in a thing and being traumatized by a thing is that it's kind of tunnel vision on a stuck point of view.
Right.
You're fixated on this is how it has to be. And the fact of the matter is that there are very, very, very few things in our life that have to be.
Yes, I agree.
We build up a lot of belief around things that have to be, but do they? You know,
right.
Questioning all of this stuff. I could not agree more. Well, all right. So
I hope that answered your question.
it did.
Okay.
No, very much so. Thank you.
Sometimes I'm a little slow on the uptake.
Yeah. All right. So moving forward, I guess I'm kind of curious. I just have one other question for you, I guess, and then we can maybe move toward wrapping up. But I've heard and seen over the last few years this idea of these statistics supporting that less and less people are going to church. I don't know if there's going to be a rebound or bounce back from that. It's one of the things I wanted to ask you about. But what do you think about that for society? Like if we go beyond an individual, right? We're working with individuals, helping them recover from abusive experiences or let's say negative experiences with religion, right? So we have this point of view that, yeah, sometimes it can be really bad and sometimes it can be horrifically bad.
Yeah.
But that's not the universal experience, right? And a lot of people are like, yeah, no, religion's fine. Yet we have this decline.
Right.
What are your thoughts about that and about where you think we're going, from that?
I think a lot of it, especially with younger people, it's the social movements, especially in the queer community and people of color. Like it has a lot to do with more liberal thinking because once you're in a society where like your best friend is gay and your religion is telling you that your best friend is gay, and especially younger people, like they have no tolerance for it anymore. They and their question, like, so that's an example, of one thing that's going on.
Sorry, you just said something. I don't know if you meant to say that when their religion tells them they're gay.
No, when they shouldn't be gay. I forgot the shouldn't.
Okay.
Yeah, so clarify that. Okay, so I think that's one part. I think it's social justice. That's one part of it. I think also too is that living in the modern world, we have such access to information now. It's not like when our parents were growing up or our grandparents, where you only could get certain information. You didn't have access to everything, so things are more easily found out about. Like you can look about Scientology, which is a thing you're not supposed to do. You're not supposed to do that if you're in the church, but people have access to Google now. So here we are. So that's part of it as well. I think also too that we have become very distrustful of systems, like control systems, and also that politics and religion keep fucking each other, and it's kind of bleeding into society. And even people that are religious, when their pastors get very like politically, they might not like that because they want their religion and politics to be separate, like I came to church because I wanted to hear, it's Easter and I want to, remember the Easter story. But this mofo was up there talking about how, abortion is bad, that's not why I came here. Right. So I think, getting a little tired of certain rhetoric. I also think, but my concern is that, and I see this, and we get people that call into RFR about this, that when they're leaving like a control group, they're flirting with, like new age stuff, woo-woo stuff. They're flirting with, other things of belief that they may not be aware that can also lead to the same problems. Because again, you are used to being part of a group that is telling you what to do.
Sure.
Thinking by yourself, it's hard. It's so much easier when someone's telling you what to do. You have to be responsible for your actions. Right. And it's just a nice little package. When you start to have to reckon with yourself of your beliefs, maybe how you treated other human beings, how you thought that you were so confident and you knew fucking everything, that can be hard. But if you move to another group and you get a new set of beliefs and you get a new set of ideas, but it's your ideas. I'm programming this crystal so I can concentrate more and it's in my control. It's like, okay, that you can think that. That's again about like letting go of the magical thinking. And I think that's harder. And that's why they're drawn to these like woo places, because it's still spiritual. So it still gives them some comfort that there might be something after we die, whether it be like reincarnation or joining like a universal consciousness of truth or whatever, like whatever that looks like, that death is not permanent. That gives you that safety that you've been taught. And also, if you had any sort of divine justice theory that then the asshole is going to get reincarnated into a cockroach next life and you get to be an angelic being. I've heard those arguments. That's terrible, right. but that I think that's why we see those shifts of people moving out of organized religion into more like a free-based, spiritual structure. Because I don't know, because people will say like non-religious, but I don't know what that means. Because does that mean you are a skeptic? Does that mean that you're agnostic? Does that mean that you're spiritual? I don't know what that or you believe in God, but you're not associated with the religion anymore. I don't know what that means. It's too ambiguity. It's too much ambiguity, which I don't like.
That's true. Because it is hard. And even if you say, well, I'm spiritual, well, okay, what does that mean? And you're going to find such a variety of definition and experience that everything you just said is going to be true for some percentage of this. So breaking all that down would certainly be useful. I think we're seeing something that is running parallel with, as you mentioned so correctly, the breakdown in trust of authority, trust in structures or systems. This is, sort of emblematic of that, because church structures, if anything, are systems.
Right. Exactly.
Holes in those systems have been revealed over the last 20, 30 years, like the Catholics with the Spotlight scandal that just kept going.
I was sorry about that too.
Or two things. It just kept going. And we still, to this day, find cover-ups at a systemic institutional level, not just one or two bad apples. And this kind of thing absolutely, destroys the faith in more ways than one. So I think we're seeing
that was my step out.
What's that?
That was my nail in the coffin moment to get me out of Catholicism. That was a nail in the coffin moment. And what was interesting is that my parents were very smart and did not let me be around people that they people that they trusted. They would, it'd be like family members or friends. It wasn't like they're going to go let me be alone with a priest or whatever. They were very, even though I went to Catholic school, it was still very much like, no, you're not a person I can trust with my kid because I don't know you personally. That was their thing. But my CCD teacher, when the Spotlight thing came out, ended up committing suicide.
Oh my God.
Yeah. So it was one of those things where like,
What is CCD? I'm sorry, I didn't.
It's Catholic confirmation. I forget the D. It's basically like so in the Catholic religion, you're baptized, and then when you're 8 years old, you take communion, and then when you're 14 years old, you go through a series of classes about the Catholic religion. And I asked way too many questions. But once you pass the courses, you basically have a ceremony where you give yourself a new name to the church, and you are going to devote your life to being a Catholic. So it's basically a proclamation that through this ceremony, because I did the work, I'm now going to reaffirm myself to my faith as an adult. It's supposed to be a choice.
No, understood. And this is at 14 years old. This is 10.
14, 15 years old, because everybody makes good decisions when they're 14, 15 years old.
Oh, yeah, of course. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean,
I have no regrets what 14-year-old Helen did.
No, I should definitely be making major life decisions for myself when I'm still a teenager. That's absolutely true.
Devoting my whole life to a structure that I don't completely understand.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and of course, and the classwork is supposed to bring you to a point of understanding, but I think that's debatable. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
So just to make sure I understood the whole thought back there. So the teacher who took you through that whole process is the one who ended up unaliving themselves after the Spotlight scandal. That's horrible. I'm sorry that happened.
Yeah, it was shocking, but not surprised. Once you look back at it and you see a certain pattern of behavior, because once you understand how grooming works and how certain behaviors manifest themselves, of course, I don't want anyone to unalive themselves, even if you are a terrible person, but because that doesn't solve the problem. It really got my brain going about if he's doing it,
right?
And then all of a sudden, everything exploded, and I was like, oh, and I grew up an hour from Boston, so this was happening in my diocese. So,
right.
And I told my mom. My mom is still very Catholic. I was like, Mom, I cannot raise my kids in this religion. I did get them baptized, to make her happy. Which is fine, more on the head. And the scandal hadn't really dropped yet, but when my son was 2 years old, it really exploded. And I was just like, no. Yeah. And I'm an SA survivor myself, not in the church, but just in different circumstances. I know that feeling. And I was like, no, oh my God, no. And I was basically like, I can't be part of any structure that's okay with harming kids and protecting the perpetrator. Anyone. If there was some organization within our movement that was doing this type of stuff, I wouldn't want to be associated with them either. And I'd be calling it out and yelling about it. And we would, because when you want to protect innocent people, that's what you do. It doesn't matter what structure you're in.
Well, very much so. Very much so. All right. Well, okay.
That's a nice note to talk about.
I thank you for the wide-ranging discussion here today about this topic. I know there are deep wells here, but I think we've covered a lot of important points about this and the work, that you've been part of, and that I get to contribute to every now and again, and that I'm sort of adjacent to as well. I think this is interesting stuff. I think it's important stuff, and you have taken more than a little bit of time, it's clear, to understand some of the psychology of this and the brain science of this and stuff, and that's important too. I would encourage everybody out there to find out more about this stuff. There's
so my friend Jason Friedman was on my podcast last night, and there was a recent, I'm just going to mention this real quick. There was a recent study, a very big multi-year study about the neuroscience of how religion changes the brain and how we process information versus people that aren't religious. The processing centers and how they take in information, it's very different than someone that doesn't have those brain patterns.
Wow.
And it starts in childhood, because your brain is pliable when you're a child. And then as you get older, those patterns get stuck. It's really fascinating. So just saying that there's science being done on the effects of religion. So, which is great.
All right. So, Helen, how do people reach out to you if they're curious to talk to you more or find out more about RFR?
So, if you want to find out more about Recovering from Religion, just go to our website, recoveringfromreligion.org. Talk to an agent. All of our information of what we do is on the website. You can reach out to an agent. That's if you want to reach out to me, you can email me at helen@recoveringfromreligion.org, or just bing me somewhere. Just put my name into the Google. My stupid face shows up. And also I launched my own new podcast called Free Thinkers Fireside. It was it's usually on Thursday, but I'm here this week, where I have people on, and people that are in this movement, but they get to pick the topic and talk about whatever they want for an hour and a half. So I call it like putting the humanist one cozy chat at a time.
Awesome. All right. Well, folks, check those things out. And I guess I'll just wrap up by saying I hope you enjoyed this show. I hope you found it educational, informative, and entertaining as always. And I will see you guys next week. Bye-bye.